Thanks to those who have joined. Just a few more minutes. Can still see a few more people joining this session, so won't be too long now. Thanks for joining. All right, I think that's a pretty stable amount of people who have joined, so we shall start the session now. Okay, hi everyone. My name's Dean Kanakis. I'm the head of marketing here at Omnipod Australia, or Insulet Australia, as some of you may know it. I'll be your host for tonight's event, which is the Omnipod Australia Q&A webinar. This is another installment of our How I Simplify series, and tonight we'll be talking about active lifestyles and diabetes. Now, before we jump into some introductions, I will just do a quick bit of housekeeping here. So if you do have questions throughout the event, we'd love to get them through. We've got one of our amazing team members, Lou, ready to take those questions. So on the bottom of your screen there, if you're on a desktop, you'll see a little Q&A section. You can open that up and enter in any questions you might have. Alternatively, the chat will not be functional at this stage. However, if you do want to reach out to us via our social channels, you can do so via Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook on the handles of Omnipod AU for Instagram, Omnipod Australia for Facebook, and Omnipod AU for Twitter. So before we get into the introductions, I will just do a quick overview of, how does an insulin pump work? So insulin pumps deliver small amounts of rapid-acting insulin continuously throughout the day. This replaces the need for multiple daily injections by a needle or an insulin pen. Now, the insulin is delivered through a small cannula that's inserted under the skin. As you can see here on the right side of the screen, that is essentially what it looks like. Now, for products like the Omnipod DASH Insulin Management System, it's comprised of two simple parts. The first part is the Personal Diabetes Manager, which is where you enter in all of your insulin requirements. And that will send a message via Bluetooth to the pod. Now, the pod is on the right-hand side of the screen here, which is a tubeless, waterproof, and wearable insulin delivery device. Now, this device can be worn almost anywhere on your body that someone would give themselves an insulin injection. And it can be worn for up to 3 days and can provide up to 3 days of non-stop insulin delivery. It has a maximum fill amount of 200 units. So either 3 days of use or 200 units of insulin to be delivered. So that is the Omnipod DASH Insulin Management System. Now, I'll jump over to our first introduction, the lovely Rachael Baker. Rachael is a passionate credentialed diabetes educator that is recognized for staying up to date with diabetes technology and optimizing these tools to be implemented in a way that is helpful and practical for people living with diabetes. She uses a holistic approach that focuses on self-empowerment for individuals living with all types of diabetes and supports them to live a life without limits to help them reach their full potential. Thank you so much for joining us, Rachael.
Thanks for having me, Dean. Thank you.
Pleasure. And over to Will Goyder, who's our podder, who's providing our podder perspective tonight. Will enjoys giving everything a go, from playing footy to swimming the Rottnest Channel swim. He's also a Fremantle Dockers supporter, which is okay, I guess. But he's an avid athlete. By the looks of things, swimming a 20K swim is no small feat. He's also a law graduate working full-time as well. Diagnosed back in 2006, he moved on to Omnipod delivery systems in 2020 and states that this has been my best type 1 related decision to date. Thank you so much for joining us, Will.
Thanks very much, Dean. And that quote is 100% true.
Great. And by any chance, we don't have the pug joining us tonight, do we?
Unfortunately not, no.
Okay.
No, not here tonight.
I do just want to level set expectations with the audience as well. All right, I'll jump into our first question. So this one's for you, Rachael. How can a tubeless insulin delivery system help people living with T1D manage their levels while playing sport?
Thanks, Dean. So this is a good one to start off with, I guess. Sport and activity is so important for everyone, but especially for those living with type 1. So how a tubeless insulin delivery system can help with this is that when you're wearing this tubeless insulin delivery system, there is no interruption to your insulin delivery. And that's something that's so important, especially when we're talking about sport or sporting games that have a longer duration. I mean, especially when we're talking about a 20K swim, but, you know, having that hour and a half or 2-hour game of footy, it's actually really hard to reconnect or connect your pump device at that quarter time or half time. And the best thing about these tubeless systems is that you will have continuous uninterrupted insulin delivery. And be mindful too, a lot of the times we will see rises with glucose levels when we are doing sport. So having that insulin trickling in the background all the time is one of the best benefits.
Thank you, Rachel. Okay, so over to you, Will. Can you share a little bit about your experience exercising with pod therapy? I know we've talked about the Roddy swim, as they call it over there, but is there anything else, and maybe about footy as well, you can share?
Yeah, for sure. So the experience was, I have to admit, it's strange at first. I spent roughly 14 years on the sort of conventional cord-based insulin pumps when I was growing up with type 1. So I was very used to the whole disconnect, reconnect element of that and all the complexities that are involved. So reducing insulin before and increasing afterwards because of the lack of insulin during exercise. I always opted to take the insulin pump off before exercise, just because I've sort of found the cord and the pump itself always managed to get in the way. In terms of how it feels to exercise, it's quite a liberating feeling. And yeah, like I said, quite that strange feeling that you're still connected to the insulin whilst you're exercising. With the swim in particular, I was a little bit worried with swimming at first, like how would it feel in terms of the streamline through the water? Would I feel any drag or anything like that? But the design makes it, I didn't even notice it was there for most of the swim and when I was training. Which was obviously a massive factor for me. And then when it comes to football, again, a little bit of concern there initially, just because football is obviously a very high contact game. But I haven't had an issue with it at all today and managed to get through games of footy unscathed and, avoid those long periods without insulin, which I used to have on the old conventional system.
Nice. Thanks, Will. So if we go back over to you, Rachel. So what has been your experience in, I guess, the startup phase or the training of people who are living active lifestyles on tubeless insulin delivery systems?
Yeah, so when I train people on these tubeless systems, it's actually really exciting because it's a really different way that people can manage their diabetes, full stop. Just managing diabetes in general with the tubeless system is actually very different and very exciting. And then one of the biggest things is it means that we can add some flexibility to exercise and activity. We can add a little bit more spontaneity because we have these systems to be able to manage the change in the glucose levels. And one of the other things as well is we can really start to optimize the glucose levels playing sport. So Will sort of alluded to this, sometimes we have to give a little bit more before or a little bit less before and then adjust afterwards. Having that capacity to actually manage the levels during the sport, it's something that's really exciting for patients. And I love, Will, that you talk about it being liberating where you wear it. And a lot of people have told me that as well. So when you're training and you're putting it on and you go, okay, yeah, all right, we'll see how I go, actually walking out of the door, they love it. You just don't even notice having it there. So I actually find it just very exciting.
Yeah, that's great to hear as well. So Will, back to you. I guess, you mentioned before, right, going from conventional over to pod therapy was pretty big change, but I guess the decision process for you, were there any concerns about, that part of your life, the exercise part and wearing a pod? And did you have any ways that you kind of overcame this?
Well, so as you sort of alluded to, I live a pretty active lifestyle and try just about every sport under the sun. So in any year, it sort of involves footy, social netball, CrossFit, spin classes, swimming. And that part of my lifestyle was what really drew me to the Omnipod in the first place. So it was actually more of a draw card more than anything. But there were the usual concerns, especially concerning whether it would sort of stay on with adhesive. I'm sure fellow diabetics can sympathize with me, but when the sweat gets involved, when you've got adhesives, it's always a bit of a concern. Is it going to stay on? And especially given it's the pump now, it's sort of more material to make sure it stays on. But so far, I mean, I've been using it for 2.5 years now, and the adhesive's been great, and I've really not had many issues with it coming off at all. And as I sort of said before, the only footy was probably the biggest concern, just because it is that contact sport and there's sort of no way to sort of control how your opponent's going to tackle you. You can't really ask them nicely to not target me on my arm or my abdomen. But in 2 seasons of footy, it's never actually come off during a game, which is pretty remarkable. And sort of testament to the way it sort of can stay concealed and sticks to your body pretty well. And I think for me, when it came to those sort of concerns, I just knew that it was going to be a trial by error kind of setup, if there were any errors, and just trying different spots on my body and figuring out what worked and what didn't. So for example, when it comes to swimming, in the long distance swimming, I normally keep it on my abdomen, because I'm using my arms so much that when your arm starts to build up the muscle mass, it can sort of become a bit irritated at times, especially when you're going those long distance, doing that long distance swimming. And I've found for footy, the abdomen or the upper backside or lower back has worked the best for me. And it all comes down to what works best for you, and that's the way it's worked for me, and just trying different ways, and I found what works, and I was never really worried enough that it was going to prevent me from doing anything. And like I said, it was one of the main reasons I got onto the Omnipod was because I knew it would complement the exercise better than the treatments I've used in the past.
Nice. Thanks, Will. You also beat me to asking you the question of what's your preferred placement for playing rugby as well, or playing AFL rather. Nicely done. So again, anyone, if you've got questions out there, we'd love to answer them. So please feel free to throw them into that Q&A section. I can see we've still got a few people joining. So welcome to those who've been joining us midway through as well. If you do have questions, please feel free to reach out to us on any of these social channels we've got up on the screen, or alternatively through that Q&A section at the bottom there. So back to you, Rachel. What has been the feedback from active people you have commenced on tubeless delivery systems? I know before you mentioned it's that, that excitement, that shock, but is there anything that maybe happens on subsequent visits or subsequent discussions you may have?
Yeah, so the feedback that I see when we start these tubeless pumps is that it's simple. I think that's one of the biggest things, is people think, oh, okay, this might be complex, and sometimes we associate pump delivery systems with that. But tubeless delivery systems can be very simple to use. And once you've done that initial training and you've been able to take that away and implement it, you realize how easy this stuff can actually be, and how that can actually decrease that burden that type 1 diabetes can be. So that's probably one of the feedbacks, is just the simplicity of the system. Something else that we hear a lot, and I hear a lot, is just the flexibility that it provides, and having that continuous uninterrupted insulin. I mean, talking even about a shower, having a shower, jumping in the pool, those sorts of things. There's no, oh, hang on, I got to disconnect, or okay, right now I'm disconnected from my insulin for an hour at a time, those sorts of things. So sometimes that actually decreases the burden a little bit. Like Will said, just knowing that, okay, there's actually still something on my body delivering that insulin all the time is actually really nice. It's quite comforting, which I know it sounds weird, but, for those of us living with type 1, which I do as well, it's quite a comforting thing for us. The last thing that I wanted to mention is that when they're coming back for those subsequent visits, what we really start to see then is the optimization of their glucose levels before, during, and after sport. And that's a great thing in itself, because you're going to feel better, you're going to have more energy, but it also improves your performance. So when we're talking about these sporting events, and especially at the serious level, which, a lot of the people I see they can be competing at that athletic level, being able to improve their glucose levels playing sport means they get better performance in their sport. Your muscles can grow faster, your muscles can grow better, you know, all those sorts of things. Your whole body is just working in such a good way. So that's a huge outcome that we see is an improvement in their overall sport and fitness.
Nice. Thank you, Rachel. Will, back over to you. What were your thoughts when using Omnipod during your first sporting event? And another one which kind of came in a little bit late was, how would you describe the experience of your first pod change versus current day pod changes?
Maybe I'll answer the pod change one first. I was so surprised at how quick it was. Actually, yeah, it sort of caught me by surprise just how easy it was. I sort of looked at it and thought, oh, there's a few things here, and it is very different. It is like quite different to what I was used to, which is quite a sort of convoluted process and took quite a lot of time. And when I was speaking to some podders who had been using it before me, they sort of said, you won't realize how quick it is until you do it. But after that, it's just, it was great. And since then I've gotten a lot better at the system of drawing up insulin and inserting it into the pod, but it never takes longer than a couple of minutes. And I found that since switching over to the dashes, that process is only sped up even more with the Bluetooth connectivity. And it's completely painless, I've found. And it's all been pretty seamless since day dot, but just that speed, and it suits the lifestyle as well, because I generally keep myself pretty busy. And I know fellow diabetics would also sympathize. There's nothing worse than just being about to leave somewhere and realizing that you're about to run out of insulin or you need to do a set change. Having a system that's nice and quick and easy is really important. When it comes to my first sporting event and how I felt, call me ambitious or dumb, but I decided to jump onto the Omnipod like 2 months before I set out to do my first duo crossing for the Roto Swim. So very, very shortly before, but I just thought, this is exciting. Let's see how it goes. So there was obviously an element of uncertainty. I'd done 2 crossings beforehand in teams when I was using a sort of conventional pump. I managed relatively well, a few hiccups here and there. And for those that don't know, by the way, the Rottnest Swim I'm based in Perth, so it's a swim from Cottesloe Beach across to Rottnest Island, 20 Ks in total. But in that 2-month period between switching onto it and doing the swim, there's obviously a lot of training. And during the training, it held up really well. I had to make a few adjustments in terms of how in terms of my insulin and those kind of settings, obviously changing delivery modes, but it held up completely fine throughout the actual swim itself, which was sort of 7 hours of swimming through fairly big waves, wind, salt water. The conditions of the day were pretty horrible as far as Rottnest swims go. And you would have seen there's a photo at the start on the slides, and it didn't budge at all. It stayed on the whole time, had no issues with it before or afterwards, which was great. I think I was actually probably more concerned about my first footy game, which came a lot later. But again, like I've mentioned, it was completely fine.
Nice. Thanks, Will. I've got a question here from the Q&A for you, actually. What is it like to sleep with? Is it bulky on the skin, if on the lower back or abdomen, or perhaps where do you wear it when you're sleeping, or do you have a preferred place? Yeah,
and so this was probably another one that was in the back of my head a little bit when I switched across. I sleep on my front, so and I often have the pod, and when I was using the old conventional system, would have it on my abdomen. So I was sort of a little bit, I just knew it was going to be something I'd have to try and see how it goes. I haven't had any issues with it. I don't really notice it now, and nor did I notice it at the time. Whether it's on my arm or whether it's on my abdomen or my back, I've never really had any problems with it. So it's always been pretty comfortable.
Nice. Thanks, Will. And just another reminder, I can see plenty of questions coming through. We've got our superstar Lou answering those in the Q&A section, so thanks. But I'll just jump back over to you, Rachel, with this one on the screen. Are there common challenges you see with managing diabetes while exercising on warmer days?
Yeah, that's a good question, Dean. I mean, it's hard enough as it is to exercise with type 1, but we've got so many variables at any time, and weather is such a huge one, whether you're exercising or not. But when you add exercise and you add the heat, we can definitely see changes in glucose levels. And what that might look like is it might look like a drop. And sometimes it might look like a rise as well. So it's quite a tricky question to answer, but essentially it's important to know that the weather and the heat is definitely going to affect your glucose levels. Sometimes why it might drop is because you're hot, your body is pumping, your blood is pumping, which means the insulin is pumping around your body and getting to your cells faster. So sometimes it'll make your glucose levels drop. On the other hand, if you are dehydrated, you're exercising in this heat, then that actually makes everything constrict and everything becomes concentrated, and therefore your blood glucose levels can rise. So it can really go either way, but it's a really important thing to consider that, especially, I'm over here in Queensland. So Queensland, Brisbane, Sunshine State, super hot, especially in summer, especially if you're out and about in the pool and those sorts of things as well. It's something to consider and just be mindful because it could go either way.
Thanks, Rachel. Will, another one for you here. Did you find the waterproof feature reliable while swimming the Rottnest Channel? And I guess what was your experience in managing your levels after the event?
Yeah, so I never really had any doubts when it came to the waterproof piece. I was just so excited that it was waterproof that I just didn't really question it. And like I said, I had a lot of time to train with it beforehand and sort of test it. But yeah, I found it extremely reliable. Like I said, if anything was going to put it to the test when it came to waterproof reliability, it was going to be Rottnest. The swim, swimming for 7 hours and in pretty bad conditions. And it stayed in place and worked afterwards. During the event itself, my levels were an absolute dream, and that was the first time they had really been very stable all throughout the swim. And I was able to measure it sort of against the previous years, which was nice, and my old system and it was just so much more convenient rather than because the way the Rotto works, if you're doing a duo or a team, you sort of tag in and out after doing short stints. So you can sort of imagine doing it in a team, you're getting in and out of the water a lot throughout the 6 or 7 hours you do it, having to reconnect, check your levels, all that kind of thing. By the time you've done all that, you're actually pretty much back in the water for your next stint. You don't really get a time to relax. Whereas when I was using the pod, it was nice just being already up, connected, and then just sort of checking the levels, seeing what I was like and making adjustments accordingly. I think I stayed sort of between 5 to 8, in that sort of 5 to 8 range throughout most of the swim, which we couldn't really believe we managed to do that given how strenuous swimming is. But I think having that sort of constant stream of insulin throughout, which is something I hadn't experienced before, was really helpful. After the swim, it's a little more complicated, and this was what I knew this was going to be the real test, because the way it works is when there's about 800, 900 meters to go, you leave the boat and you swim the whole thing. If you're on the boat, that is, you swim with your partner or your team. You swim the whole way in to cross the finish line, and then you sort of have to find everyone through the masses of people afterwards. And so it can be quite a while between swimming into shore and reconnecting. And obviously there was a crazy amount of adrenaline through my system, and I'd sort of had some carbs before the last stint. So I knew that getting back to the boat at the very end, I'd be probably quite on the high side, and no surprises there that I was, but I was able to bring myself down relatively quickly and then stay stable from memory for most of the afternoon. And it was the nighttime actually, which was the biggest surprise and the most comfort. I think I went through the night very stable, which after that kind of exercise, I hadn't planned for. I'd sort of planned for a sleepless night. But that was a really great endorsement for Omnipod. I managed to stay stable when it was really convenient to use. And I had a very similar experience doing it this year in terms of levels during, afterwards, and into the night. I had that same easy, manageable experience, and it was it all went off pretty well for me. So I was just have to say I gave it a pretty good test both last year and this year, and both in the race, and managed to. It really suited. It was really suited to it, and I found it really great both before, during, and after.
Fantastic. Thanks, Will. That's great to hear about your experience swimming the Rotto. I can imagine it would have been a tricky one to deal with any challenges midway through. So great to hear you had some success there. I can see a few questions coming through. One of them about access, one of them about future technology. And look, absolutely, these are, from an access perspective, we are working through a solution with the Department of Health and Aging, and we're also engaged with the Minister of Health's office. We will always make any updates available through our usual channels, so social media, email, etc. But look, we're always working towards that goal for better access for the community here in Australia as well. And to address the question about future technologies, so look, that is something that as an organisation, we are always looking to bring to more and more markets. Unfortunately, there are many stopgaps milestones for us to hit. And look, again, as we learn more about those and as those timelines come to fruition, those are the sort of things we will be sharing with the community through our usual channels. But at this point in time, there's not too much we can share, but we will be always working towards that goal and making sure that everyone's updated and aware of the work that we're doing. So I'll go back to you, Rachel. These will be our last two questions. So Rachel, who would you consider for tubeless pump therapy?
So this question is very short. My answer is everyone. I think that's really important. I think anyone living with diabetes should have access to the latest and the greatest, and also have choice about their tools to manage diabetes, because there's so many different ways that we can manage diabetes, and all different tools work for different people. So you have to think about, what do I want in a pump? And if someone's answer is a tubeless pump therapy, then I believe they should have access, or they should have the capacity or the ability to get on the system. So I really do believe that it's for everyone. And as you said, everyone works very, very hard to try and improve access so that we can get anyone who is willing and is able and is supported with a diabetes educator or through the company. I think that the answer is everyone.
Thank you, Rachel. Will, over to you. We talked a few times tonight about the consideration process, any concerns, how you overcame them. But I guess if you could look at yourself in the past and, give yourself a tap on the shoulder, what advice would you give to your past self when it comes to considering the Omnipod DASH system?
My answer is similarly short. It would be to get onto it as soon as humanly possible. I'd heard murmurings about the pod. I've actually got a very close connection to the pod. I was the first person in the world to trial the closed loop system back in 2011, I think it was, at PMH Hospital here in Perth. That was on the Medtronic system, and it was all very exciting at the time. And, this thing, closed loop, and what might come of it, and sensors, and it was all still pretty new technology. And the doctor in charge of that was Dr. Trang Lai, who is now very senior at Insulet in the States, and has been working and I've been hearing over the years murmurings of this pod, this device. Imagine a pump without cords. And I was thinking all the way through, that'll be so cool when it comes around, because it would suit me so well. And now Trang's doing amazing things with Insulet over in the States and working hard on that front. And so when I did find out there was a way to get the pods across to Australia from the States, I sort of thought, oh yeah, that'd be good. But I didn't think too much of it. it took a little bit of prodding, and eventually I looked into it and managed to get onto them. And as was made aware in sort of the first few minutes of the presentation, it was definitely the best diabetes management decision that I have made to date. And it sounds really trivial, but and there's many benefits that I've enjoyed when it comes to the Omnipod, but just losing the cord has been sort of gave me the most amazing feeling of liberation, and has just been so perfectly complementary to my active lifestyle to date, which, as I've sort of mentioned, involves a really broad spectrum of activities and sports, and I'm living a very busy lifestyle, and it's just having the ability to have the pump close to me, on me at all times, without worrying about the connection is amazing. And it was also great to hear what non-diabetics, my friends and family, have said when they see it. They said everyone thinks it's a sensor at first, and you explain it's a pump. They sort of go, "Oh, that's so cool and amazing that technology's come that far." So yeah, I would have definitely told myself to try and get onto it sooner rather than later. And yeah, I've never looked back.
Thank you so much, Will. All right, guys, I think that concludes tonight's session. So thank you so much, everyone, for taking the time out of your evening to attend, and a very special thank you to Rachael and Will, and of course our superstar on the moderation, the question and answer there, Lou. So thanks, everyone, and have a great evening.
Thanks, Dean.